Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's hearing subcommittee. My name's Grace Evans. I'm the Deputy Monitoring Officer for Dorset Council. The subcommittee this afternoon is made up of Councillor Susan Cocking, Councillor Barry Gorringe and Councillor Richard Biggs. Also attending is Jackie Andrews, the Investigating Officer. And we have two members of the staff of the Dorset Council to clerk and to operate the Teams site for us. So I'm going to move straight to item number 1 of the agenda today, which is the election of a chairman. Could you let me have your nominations, councillors, for chairman today?
Councillor Cocking, I would like to nominate Councillor Richard Biggs as chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor Gorringe.
Thank you, councillor. So, Councillor Biggs, you're chairman for today, and I'll hand the meeting over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your attendance here today. The first thing on the agenda is for apologies for absence. We're obviously all here, so we can move on. The next item is number 3, which is the declaration of interest. Do any of our councillors here have any declarations to declare? I have nothing.
Nothing, thank you, Chair.
Nothing, Chair.
Okay. In that case, we'll move on to item 4, which is to review our terms of reference and the Dorset Council's complaint procedure, which I'm sure you're familiar with if you've been on these before. Don't know if we want to take you through any particular ones of that, but you've all had opportunities to read those. Are there any questions, comments?
Not at this stage, Chair.
No, Chair.
We're happy to be guided by our Deputy Monitoring Officer if we stray off what we should be doing. The next item on the agenda is item 5, which is whether we should move into exempt business. The presumption is always to hold these meetings in public. There are a series of tests where that we may go into exempt business. I do not believe that those are tested and that we should remain in open business, but I'm happy to discuss that if any our councillors have any disagreement with that.
I'm happy at the moment, Chair.
I think it's important that we are seen in public to be doing these things in public, and obviously the complaints are around meetings that were held in public, so I think it's very fitting that we continue that. So we'll now move on to item 6, which is the first complaint. We've previously, the committee's asked for the investigating officer to carry out an investigation, which has been done. You've had all the reports from Jackie, as well as numerous emails as well, but we're here to focus on the Jackie's report really at this process, and to look at any areas that are in dispute, etc. That's our process. We will then discuss the outcomes individually, and for our guests who've joined, this is not an opportunity to challenge that. That will be held at another stage should we decide to take that forward to a hearing. So I think I'll go straight to you, Jackie, to take us through the first complaint, which is 008/20.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And as you say, my name's Jackie Andrews and I'm the Service Manager for Democratic and Electoral Services. But I'm before you today as the Investigating Officer in respect of the complaints you're being asked to consider. All the complaints before you today relate to Shaftesbury Town Council. And prior to carrying out the investigations, I read a number of documents that had been adopted by the Town Council, including the Code of Conduct and the Bullying and Harassment Policy. And these documents have all been provided to you in advance of the meeting, so I hope you've had an opportunity to look at those too. I think before I start presenting my first report, I think it's relevant to point out at the outset that during the course of my various interviews, there are a lot of points raised by both Councillor Tippins and Councillor Yeo that are not actually related to the complaints that I was asked to investigate. And for that reason, I don't comment on those issues within my report, but the detail is set out in the statements appended to my report, so you do have that information. And perhaps what I could say is this may demonstrate a long-standing frustration they've both had in respect of their perception of the governance of the Town Council. But the first report before you today is 00820. And in that complaint, there was a number of allegations of breach of the Code of Conduct. To summarise those, the first was that Councillor Yeo was conducting himself very aggressively towards the acting chair. The second was that Councillor Tippins repeatedly was aggressive and in fact bullying towards the town clerk. And thirdly, that during the presentation, at no time did Councillor Tippins look up at the presentation and sat with her back towards it. The meeting to which the complaint refers was held in February 2020, and members have received a copy of the minutes of that meeting. This was one that wasn't actually live streamed or recorded because we weren't operating under the temporary regulations preventing face-to-face meetings as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So there was no recording of that meeting for me to view. I wasn't asked to investigate this complaint until June due to the council having to prioritise its work in responding to the coronavirus pandemic. And as some time had passed since the meeting and my interview with the complainant, she could not recall sufficient detail in respect of the first two allegations she made. So I don't believe it's appropriate to pursue these complaints. So my suggestion to you is that those two are dismissed. However, I did believe that the allegation in respect of Councillor Tippins' conduct towards a guest presenter should be considered further. Excuse me, I just have a sip of water. As you can see from my report, which you've all had and has also been supplied to both Councillor Tippins and the complainant, the detail of the interviews is attached to the report, so I don't intend to go through that in any detail, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. With regard to disputed facts, the complainant says in her complaint that Councillor Tippins did not face the screen during the presentation, while Councillor Tippins said she did in fact turn towards the presentation on 3 occasions, but this caused a jarring pain in her back, so she stopped twisting. Following my interview with both Councillor Tippins and the complainant, the conclusion I reached following my interviews was that Councillor Tippins had not taken sufficient steps to engage with the presentation. From our discussions, it was clear that Councillor Tippins questioned whether the presentation should even have been given to the Town Council in a formal meeting, as she felt it was merely for information and should not form part of the Town Council's agenda. She stated this on a number of occasions, and I perceive this demonstrated disinterest in the topic. I do have my own views on the scheduling of the presentation, but it's not really relevant to this complaint. I would ask you to note that the seating arrangements for that meeting were preset by officers, and the room is set out with the councillor nameplates predetermined, and that's how Councillor Tippins found herself facing away from the screen. And obviously she tried to turn but found this caused her problems with her back. However, I feel that Councillor Tippins could have explained to the council meeting that while she wasn't able to turn, she would be listening, and therefore her actions wouldn't have been perceived to be rude or disrespectful, perhaps. Councillor Tippins' reasons for not doing so and not moving are set out in my report, and I have to say I don't find them credible. And one of the reasons given was that she didn't feel able to interrupt the meeting or the presentation to say she needed to move. And I feel that any councillor would have felt able just to raise their hand to point that out. In conclusion, I believe that Councillor Tippins was in breach of the Code of Conduct by failing to treat the presenter with respect. While the complaint wasn't made directly by the presenter, I felt that the complaint warranted investigation as it was about the perception of anybody who chose to view that meeting and Councillor Tippins' conduct, and more importantly, how this might impact on the reputation of the council. Councillor Tippins said, and it's set out in her statement, that she felt it was difficult to see how not paying attention to a particular item on agenda could ever be regarded as a breach of the code of conduct. And by way of this statement, Councillor Tippins is inferring that she recognised she was not paying attention. And in my view, this is very disrespectful to a guest of the council who's been invited to attend. I also concluded that Councillor Tippins behaved in such a way which could reasonably be regarded as bringing their office or the council into disrepute. The presenter, as an invited guest, has the right to expect a level of respect and attention from all members. And if one fails to recognise or show interest in their work, it's likely to have a negative reflection on the council as a whole. I don't think there's anything else I want to add at this point, but I'm happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you very much. Members, you've obviously heard the report, you've read the report. It's not for us to comment on the general governance arrangements of the town council. A bit of an echo now today, somebody's got their mic on. So we need to focus very much on the evidence and what we can deal with. I think my personal view, but I'll open it to other members, is certainly there is lack of evidence of the aggressive behaviour. I think that's disputed, certainly, but I think there is a case around respect for others, particularly an outside body presenting to the town council. I think is a difficult one. Some mitigation has been offered by Councillor Tippins, and I think we can sort of form an opinion on that. I think as councillors, one would hope you'd be able to get up and put your hand up or move, but that I think it would seem to be that some evidence there that is disrespectful. But I will ask Councillor Susan Cocking first for your opinion on.
Thank you, Councillor Biggs. Yeah, I agree with the lack of evidence on the behaviour of the aggression, but I believe that every person that's invited to a council meeting, whether they're actually a councillor or a guest of that council, deserve the respect to be shown to them. And if Councillor Tippins in her mitigation saying that her back or she was uncomfortable, when you stand as a councillor, you're quite an assertive and be a spoken person. You can speak up for yourself. So I would think if I was uncomfortable in a meeting, then I would have the foresight to actually stand up and ask to move into a more comfortable position, and not paying attention to the screen or the guest speaker is bringing the council into disrepute. And I think that's one of the things of the 7 principles of public life that we should adhere to as a councillor. So I find that behaviour not really acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Gorringe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I tend to agree with what Councillor Cocking said. I think in this particular instance, there's obviously been a lack of respect to the other councillors, and I think this is where the situations arose. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're all agreed on that one aspect. So perhaps I can turn to the monitoring officer, deputy monitoring officer, as to advise what our options are. Thank you.
So your options in terms of the first two complaints, where the investigating officer has recommended a dismissal of those two complaints, you can reach that decision and agree to dismiss those if that's your feeling. The investigating officer has concluded in her report that there has been a breach of the code of conduct in respect of that final part of the complaint to do with the presentation and relating to Councillor Tippins. If you accept the outcome of the investigating officer's report, then we will need to convene a full hearing of a subcommittee in order for a final decision to be made, and also for any sanctions to be imposed. And at that future meeting on a date to be set, that would be an opportunity then where Councillor Tippins would be able to address that hearing. There is a third option for you. If you feel that there has been a breach but it doesn't warrant a full hearing and sanctions, you have a third option of referring this to the monitoring officer for an informal resolution. And informal resolution can cover such things as mediation or requesting an apology. So they're the three options that you've got this afternoon.
Thank you, Grace. That's very useful. I think there's clear agreements around the first two options being dismissed. I'm looking around at my fellow councillors. Is there agreement on that? Those are dismissed through lack of evidence.
Yes, agreed, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. That's my view as well. And the third one, I think there is a feeling that it was disrespectful. It's literally a way forward from here, where we want to go through a full hearing or take an informal route. Is there a view on that, one way or the other? So I'll go to Susan Cocking first.
Chair, I think I would a formal route, and for Grace's second option was the formal. Could you just repeat that formal review, Grace, please? Was the formal.
If you feel that there is a case to answer, and you would like the option of making a final decision and imposing any sanctions, then that would require a full hearing, which would need to be convened on a future date.
Yes, that would be the option that I would like to ask to take.
Mr. Barry-Orange?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that actually. So I'll go along with what Councillor Cocking said.
Okay, I'm content for that to be the option, if that can be arranged, please.
So I can confirm to you then that the first two items are dismissed, and the third option, the third part of the complaint, then we will arrange a full hearing on a future date. The complainant and obviously the councillor will be invited to attend that meeting, and at that meeting both the complainant and the councillor will have the opportunity there to address the committee that is convened. After this meeting today, it may take a couple of days, but we will write out to all involved, confirming the outcome of today's subcommittee meeting and explaining what the next steps will be.
Can I ask a question? Can I be a witness at that trial, please, seeing as I was there?
Sorry, who is speaking?
Councillor Yeo. I was actually
Councillor
present.
Yeo, you're not permitted to address or to speak at this afternoon's subcommittee meeting. You're essentially here as an observer. If there is a need to call witnesses, then we will do so for the full hearing in the future.
Okay.
Okay, we'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 7, which is the next complaint, and ask our our investigating officer to take us through her report on this one, which again you've had in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The detail of the complaint by Mr. Frith related to the conduct of Councillor Yeo during an extraordinary meeting of Shaftesbury Town Council on the 2nd of June that was live streamed using Zoom as we'd moved into the temporary regulations preventing face-to-face meetings. This meeting on the 2nd of June was to debate a motion of no confidence in one of the councillors, and Mr. Frith alleges that Councillor Yeo failed to uphold the standards required by the Town Council's Code of Conduct, and whilst he was muted as another councillor spoke, he could clearly be seen to be mouthing the word wanker. whilst making the equivalent hand gesture in front of the camera with no attempt to retract or apologise for his actions. I've watched the recording of this meeting on the 2nd of June, and I've provided a link to the recording to members if you wish to view this yourself. I noted when watching this meeting that on a number of occasions, although not raised by Mr. Thrift in his initial written complaint, I noted that on 6 occasions, Councillor Yeo also mouthed the word bullshit, and this was actually audible on one further occasion. In respect of the audible occasion, Councillor Yeo was invited by the chairman to retract the word, but he refused to do so. I interviewed both Mr. Frith and Councillor Yeo in respect of this complaint, and the detailed statements are appended to my report. And again, I don't intend to go through those in any great detail, but I'm happy to answer any questions. As is the case with all of the statements appended to all of my reports, all those interviewed were given an opportunity to agree the notes of our interview, and the notes I drafted in respect to my interview with Councillor Yeo are appended at Appendix B, and I confirm that I believe them to be an accurate record of what was said during the interview. But Councillor Yeo, instead of accepting those, chose to rewrite the interview record. Councillor Yeo's extensive changes are shown in red on the second version that I chose to attach at Appendix C. I would point out to members that I was accompanied by a note taker during the meetings, and I'm satisfied that the original version at Appendix B was a true record of that interview. The changes made by Councillor Yeo are actually additional points or expanded points that he's made in hindsight. There are no disputed facts in respect of this complaint. The nature of the business being discussed at the meeting was a vote of no confidence in Councillor Tippins, and as you might expect, from the outset, that it was clear that there was likely to be tension. And I think, having had the opportunity to view the meeting, the body language of some of the members clearly demonstrates this. What I did note, having watched the video, is that Councillor Yeo sought to raise a point of order. And in my view, the chairman did not give him a fair opportunity to indicate on which part of the standing orders he was wishing to make a point. And it was clear that this was very frustrating for Councillor Yeo. However, whilst acknowledging that, it still doesn't remove his responsibility to abide by the code of conduct, nor does it in any way excuse his choice of language or the gestures used during the meeting. I would say that whilst his words weren't made directly to the camera on every occasion, the expression that resulted in Mr. Frith making his complaint was clearly intended to be viewed by anyone watching the broadcast. It was made very directly towards the camera. And when I asked Councillor Yeo about his conduct, he didn't deny any of his actions. And he even stated, I quote, that they were necessary and appropriate. And his reasoning for this is set out in the record of the interview. I appreciate that democracy often involves debating differing opinions and expressing, challenging or disagreeing with views, ideas and opinions, and that is part of healthy democracy. But in my view, there is never an excuse for this not to be done professionally and with respect. As elected members, the highest standards have to be maintained, so those that have elected councillors can feel comfort that they are going to be acting in a professional manner in their capacity as town councillors. Just to sum up, in conclusion, my view is that the conduct of Councillor Yeo was childish, unprofessional, offensive and wholly disrespectful to fellow councillors, staff and members of the public viewing the meeting. And I'm of the opinion that Councillor Yeo is in breach of the code of conduct by failing to treat his fellow councillors with respect. And I think his behaviour could reasonably be regarded as bringing his office or the council into disrepute. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. That's a very thorough summing up of your report, which I'm sure you've all read. And some of us would have had a brief opportunity to look at some of the video. We're not here to, as I said before, to pass judgment on the conduct or governance of Shaftesbury Town Council when the other town council were here purely to look at the code of conduct. The facts, in my view, are clear and then haven't been disagreed with. What has been challenged, I think, is Councillor Yeo is sort of expressed reasons why he might have taken his action, and I think that is something for another committee to look at, and perhaps to challenge whether there was exceptional circumstances. In my view, I've never seen anything as disrespectful in terms of language happen before in any of my nearly 30 years of being on a council of some shape or form. You know, what did surprise me was perhaps the challenge to the investigating officer's report. You know, it would appear to be adding things rather than a dispute of what was said at that meeting, which is sort of, you know, another opportunity to put in other points in a slightly aggressive manner. But so I'll keep to form, and I'll go to Councillor Susan Cocking first.
Thank you, Chair. I did manage to watch the videos, both of them, and the one on the comments about the bullshit, where you could hear the verbally bullshit, that was said very early on in the meeting. Again, we need to adhere to 7 principles of public life. I find it quite appalling that councillors can actually speak like that at a public meeting. We all get, and Councillor Yeo's excuse was that he felt it necessary and appropriate. We all get, and he was frustrated. We all get frustrated sometimes when we can't ask questions at council meetings, or we find that we're not being perhaps listened to in the way that we want to be listened to. But it's my belief that you should not speak to other fellow councillors or portray yourself to the public in such a unprofessional and disgraceful manner. And I believe
well,
that
even when the Mayor of Shaftesbury is lying to the people of Shaftesbury, he's lying to the people of Shaftesbury.
Can you let
for you to actually speak to the council, the committee? You've already been told by the monitoring officer.
Please continue.
This is category injustice that you're putting out. It's totally improper.
Councillor Yeo, if you continue to interrupt the subcommittee this afternoon, I will ask one of the officers to mute your microphone. Please do not interrupt the subcommittee again. That's the second warning that you've had.
Susan, can you continue?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think what I've just experienced from this councillor speaks volumes for himself, as he has no respect for councillors or for anyone. And I believe that he is in breach of code of conduct. I will dismiss what he's actually done this afternoon, but the evidence that I saw at those meetings speaks for itself, and I believe that the councillor is in breach of code of conduct.
Thank you. Moving to Barry Gorringe. You're on mute.
Councillor Gorringe, your microphone is muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I think Councillor Yeo has been disrespectful, and he's had aggressive behaviour. He is in breach of the code of conduct, and he just hasn't been professional as a town councillor. Thank you.
And the Mayor was when he lied to the people of Shaftesbury. Is that what you're saying? It's okay to lie to the people of Shaftesbury.
Excuse me, you have
Yeah,
to...
no. Sorry, Councillor Biggs. Councillor, yeah, we won't tell you a third time. That's the final warning that you're going to get. And the next time you speak over the subcommittee, I will ask for your microphone to be muted.
Thank you. So again, we'll label the course of action either to dismiss before informal resolution, or move to full meeting to be arranged at a future date. I think we're quite clear that it should go to another full meeting where there'll be ample opportunity for Councillor Yeo to challenge us, and hopefully we won't have the interruptions unnecessarily. Is that the agreement of my fellow councillors?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Right, we now move on to where we are. Item 8, which is complaint number 3, and again to Jackie Andrews for her report. you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the final complaint before you today, members, is a complaint by Councillor Welsh of Shaftesbury Town Council, who makes an allegation that Councillor Tippins and Yeo were in breach of various Town Council policies during a full Council meeting on the 14th of April, and he refers to the Town Council's bullying and harassment policy and the Town Council's Code of Conduct. Both of these documents have been supplied to members, so hopefully you've had an opportunity to have a look at these. His complaint was that during a discussion about the Town Council's reaction and community response to COVID-19, he made a statement about the Town Council being an independent body, and in his opinion, he felt it should protect the community how he saw fit. Councillor Welsh alleges that in response to his statement, he said that he was called an idiot by both Councillor Tippins and Councillor Yeo, and that the chairman invited Councillor Tippins to retract her remark, but she refused to do so. I've taken an opportunity of watching the recording of the meeting on the 14th of April on a number of occasions, and having watched the video, I can confirm that Councillor Yeo didn't directly call Councillor Welsh an idiot as suggested in his complaint. However, Councillor Yeo did make the comment, "She's got a point," in response to Councillor Tippins' name calling. And when I asked Councillor Yeo during our interview about his comment, he failed to give a clear and ambiguous response, but instead claimed that his comment was in response to other statements made earlier in the meeting. I'll come back to this later if I may. I've interviewed Councillors Welsh, Tippins and Yeo and respected the complaint, and a record of the meetings is again attached to my reports. As with the previous complaint, Councillor Yeo was given the opportunity to agree the notes, but again made extensive changes that are shown in red in the second version attached to Appendix D. And I would just remind members that I was accompanied by a note taker, and I'm satisfied that the original version of the interview with Councillor Yeo was an accurate record of what was said, and his changes are merely additional points or expanded points which he wished to make in hindsight. Looking first at the Town Council's bullying and harassment policy, having read that, I'm clear that this is actually aimed at protecting employees of the council, so does not therefore directly apply to members. But I've noted in my report that one might anticipate that the spirit of the policy would apply to members in their interactions with one another, although the policy doesn't actually specifically refer to members. With regard to disputed facts, as I mentioned earlier, when I asked Councillor Yeo a direct question to confirm that his comment, "She's got a point," was in response to Councillor Tippins' name calling, he refused to give a clear and ambiguous response, but instead claimed that his comment was in response to other statements made earlier in the meeting. In my view, this simply isn't credible. You don't wait until minutes after a statement when other discussions have taken place to respond, "She's got a point," to an earlier comment without clarifying that you're actually responding to something that was said earlier in the meeting, in my view. During my interview with Councillor Tippins, she referred at length to alleged actions by other councillors outside of the meeting on the 14th of April in terms of a campaign to remove her from the Town Council. I advised Councillor Tippins that she should raise these allegations through the appropriate channels, i.e. Code of Conduct complaints, and I've not commented on these allegations as part of my investigation of the complaint made by Councillor Welsh, as they're not relevant to the complaint, which relates to conduct at the meeting on the 14th of April. Councillor Tippins also stated that no one knew the meeting was being recorded, and I have to say that this is actually irrelevant to the Code of Conduct complaint I was asked to investigate, because to me it doesn't really matter whether the meeting was being recorded or not. Regardless of whether councillors knew in advance about the recording, I can also advise that the chairman clearly stated the fact the meeting was being recorded 2 minutes into the meeting, which you'll be able to see if you have viewed the recording. I also note that Councillor Tippins suggested that she was baited into name calling by the other councillors. I personally don't agree with this perception. Whilst I accept that Councillor Tippins had recently experienced a very difficult bereavement and may have made a spur of the moment comment as a result of a heightened emotional state, Councillor Tippins could have taken the opportunity to retract the comment made to Councillor Welsh and apologise when asked to do so. We can all say things in the heat of the moment, particularly bearing in mind that Councillor Tippins had been through an exceptionally difficult time. However, when she was invited to retract and apologise, she didn't, and she actually compounded the insult by making another. Councillor Tippins said that other councillors were allowed to shout at her throughout the meeting. I've watched the recording on a number of occasions, and whilst councillors did ask challenging questions of Councillor Tippins, there was only one point where Councillor Hollingshead did shout at Councillor Tippins, calling her a liar. However, in respect of that point, I would ask members to note that a subsequent meeting on the 2nd of June, Councillor Hollingshead made a public apology to the councillor for his comments, and this can be reviewed in the recording on the 2nd of June. Councillor Tippins noted that in the complaint, Councillor Welsh had indicated that he was willing to accept an apology, and she was of the view that he could have diffused the whole situation and not supported the vote of no confidence in her if he'd simply asked her for an apology. But in response to that, I would suggest that equally, Councillor Tippins could have diffused the situation by offering an apology to Councillor Welsh before he felt compelled to submit a complaint of alleged breach of the Code of Conduct. In conclusion, members, I'm of the view that both Councillor Tippins and Councillor Yeo have breached the Code of Conduct, failing to treat other councillors with respect. The name calling by Councillor Tippins was childish, unprofessional and wholly disrespectful. In my opinion, Councillor Yeo's breach was mild, as his comment was less direct. However, it does still demonstrate a lack of respect for his fellow councillors. The issue of bullying that was raised by Councillor Welsh is perhaps less clear, as whether or not someone has been bullied can be very subjective. And I don't believe it's for me to decide whether I would have felt bullied. It's how the conduct made Councillor Welsh feel, and he indicated in our interview, and you'll see from the notes, that he felt humiliated and offended, and that the comments had adversely affected him. To end, I'm also of the view that both Councillor Tippins and Councillor Yeo have behaved in a way which could reasonably be regarded as bringing their office into disrepute. The fact that the meeting became the subject of an article in a number of national newspapers demonstrated the impact was far-reaching, and in my view is likely to lower the public's expectations and confidence in its elected members at Shaftesbury Town Council. I'd ask members to note that Councillor Tippins issued an apology to Councillor Welsh on the 25th of August, a copy of which you've all had. However, this isn't referred to in my report because it was made after I had completed my investigation and finalised my report and circulated it to all parties involved on the 21st of August. So the apology came 4 days after my report and therefore is not referenced in the report. I don't think I want to add anything further, Chairman, but I'm happy to answer any questions as always.
Thank you, Jackie, for another full report. I did watch pretty much all the meeting, and it was difficult to watch for a number of angles. But again, focusing on the complaints, I think that, you know, it was disrespectful. It was bullying behaviour. However, as we've heard, that there was an apology and there was mitigating circumstances. I think Councillor Yeo was, as has been said, was relatively mild. I think we can dismiss that. I mean, there's a number of councillors whose behaviour wasn't fantastic at that meeting. I'm sure we've all been on meetings, but again, we're here to focus on the actual complaints. I don't know, it's a tricky one. Susan, do you have a view?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, for your excellent report. Yeah, some of it you could say, yes, Councillor Yeo saying that after Councillor Tippins' comment, well, she's got a point, perhaps we, you know, he muttered that till some other comment, but I don't think, as Jackie said, that's not a credible excuse. And I think when we're actually at council meetings, whether they're virtual or face-to-face, that we have to be careful and mindful of what we say, whether it's a flippant comment or commenting on what another councillor has already said. Councillor, I watched the video, the recording of it, and it was very uncomfortable to watch. That we actually have councillors who speak to each other like this at a council meeting. Yes, it always gets heated and debated. You know, you could watch some of our council meetings. That's what we're there for, to challenge each other. You're there to challenge each other, not to be rude and aggressive and bully people and make them actually feel, what's he said, humiliated and offended, and to call someone an idiot and thick and then not apologise. Are they in a playground? I just don't understand where they get their professionalism from. I think, you know, personally, I think they are in breach of the code of conduct, because we expect our councillors to adhere to the proper conduct that they signed up to, and not to make flippant comments about she's got a point and he's thick and he's an idiot. You know, we're here to actually challenge and make decisions that are best for our community. And personally, I don't think these two councillors did at this meeting. I watched the whole thing from start to finish, and I don't think that their behaviour was professional at all. You can have a heated debate and you can challenge each other, but there's a way to do it, and in my opinion, they did not do it in a professional manner.
And the other councillors did, yeah?
Thank you. Can I move to Councillor Barry Gorringe?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's a very complicated report that Jackie's done on this, and I haven't watched the video, and it's quite difficult to get your head around it. But I mean, from what Jackie's report has said, and it sounds as though these councillors have been completely disrespectful. That they've used aggressive and bullying behaviour. They haven't adhered to the code of conduct, and there's certainly, I certainly think that it should be. There's a possibility maybe that we should be looking at a hearing on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are finding the behaviour is unacceptable, and even despite the apology, which we are aware of, which came after, there is still a case to be heard, because we expect, you know, as it's been said, high standards in public office, and the public expect it. They expect challenging and difficult meetings, and as has been said, you know, we've all been at meetings that have got a bit fraught. There does seem to be a pattern here, some wider issues, no doubt, but we are here to look at this particular allegation. I believe, I agree with my fellow councillors that this too should be referred to another meeting, another hearing, at again a future date when there'll be opportunities for Councillor Yeo and Tibbins to respond and challenge as in a democracy, but it doesn't seem to me to be good, proper standards for councillors. Thank you. So we have reached the point on all three complaints. I'll just refer to the Deputy Monitoring Officer to ensure she has understood what the next steps are, or explain to you all what the next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the next steps will be, after today's meeting, letters will be sent out confirming the outcome of today's hearing subcommittee, and with details of a meeting to be held in the future where you have decided that you would like full hearings to be held, and details will be included in those letters of how the hearings will be conducted.
Are you actually going to listen to the entire meetings before that happens? So you actually hold meetings?
So as I've already explained, it's not for you to address the committee today. You've already heard from 3 of the members of this subcommittee that they've watched the hearings, and the subcommittee that will be convened will be able to also view those videos and to receive the report of the investigating officer, and you will get an opportunity to address the committee at that full hearing.
Well, I just heard from a councillor then who just said he hadn't even seen any of that meeting. It's outrageous that you're talking about something that you haven't watched the whole meetings. There's an audio recording of the meeting in March.
Me, we have said
this
is not your opportunity to address the committee.
Well,
That
I'm
was
afraid
made
to say this is grossly improper what's going on here.
We are following the procedures as laid down in the Code of Conduct, and we're following it correctly.
Well, as you know, I've been referring to my solicitor about this, and I will be referring this to the Ombudsman.
That is entirely your right.
Well, it'd be nice if you actually got some procedures in place, so you actually watched the evidence before you commented upon anything.
That's your view, and you're entitled.
It's a fact.
Have you finished?
Yes, I look forward to the next meeting. Okay,
thank you, committee. That concludes this part of the business. If the guests wish to withdraw from the meeting, if others would like to stay on, just for a quick wash up after the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. If councillors and officers could stay on the call, thank you. No.